Oh, welcome to those who are joining. Welcome, Getty. Hello, Bhumika. Welcome. Maria, welcome. Manal. Hello, Kim. Welcome. Hello, Kumu. Welcome. Norma, welcome. Hello, Gregory. Welcome. All right, friends, I think we can get started. The link is in the description to the sutta if you'd like to follow along. We're going to be covering Majjhima Nikaya number 13, the longer discourse on the massive suffering. Mahadukkha Kanda Sutta. So I have heard. At one time, the Buddha was staying near Savatthi in Jeta's Grove, Anathapindika's monastery. Then several mendicants robed up in the morning and, taking their bowl and robes, entered Savatthi for alms. Hello, Mary. Welcome. Then it occurred to them, it's too early to wander for alms in Savatthi. Why don't we visit the monastery of the wanderers of other religions? So keep in mind to remember that the part of the culture at the time was the samanas. These were people who kind of checked out of regular society and were doing all kinds of various practices looking for awakening. Right. So when we see in the suttas where it says other wanderers, this is what is being talked about. So they went into the village to get their meal for the day, but they figured it's too early. So let's go engage with other samanas. Then they went to the monastery of the wanderers of other religions and exchanged greetings with the wanderers there. When the greetings and polite conversation were over, they sat down to one side. The wanderers said to them, Reverends, the ascetic Gautama advocates the complete understanding of sensual pleasures, and so do we. The ascetic Gautama advocates the complete understanding of forms, and so do we. The ascetic Gautama advocates the complete understanding of feelings, and so do we. What then is the difference between the ascetic Gautama's teaching and instruction and ours? Those mendicants neither approved nor dismissed the statement of the wanderers of other religions. They got up from their seat thinking, we will learn the meaning of this statement from the Buddha himself. So this is a very kind of wise response or the Buddha in another sutta says this is actually how you should, when you hear something, you should neither accept it nor reject it right away. You should question it and contemplate it. And so these monastics here are like, well, maybe we're not quite sure how we should answer this. So maybe it's better to not get into an argument and not try to debate or anything like that. Neither approving or dismissing, we will just leave. We will learn the meaning of this statement from the Buddha himself. Then after the meal, when they returned from alms round, they went up to the Buddha, bowed, sat down to one side, and told him what had happened. The Buddha said, "Mendicants, when wanderers of other religions say this, you should say to them, but reverence, what is the gratification, the danger, and the escape when it comes to sensual pleasures?" So this is a very specific thing. Oh, yes, we should know dukkha, we should know sensual pleasures, we should know. But what does it mean to know? Right? There are a variety of different words that the Buddha uses. We have sati, sampajanya, mindfulness and clear comprehension. We have yoniso manasikara, wise contemplation or investigation. We also have this very important framework for investigation: the gratification, the danger, and the escape. This is very important. It's not just to know sensual pleasures. Know the gratification. Understand why they are so gratifying. Right? This is something that people actually don't think that the people think that the Buddha said to avoid sensual pleasures or to ignore them or to fight against them. And yes and no, but really the way that you fight against them is to know them deeply. You understand the gratification. Oh yeah, these are very gratifying things, but there's a danger. There's a drawback. I understand the drawback of that. And when you understand the danger and the drawback, you understand the escape. This is very, very important Dhamma. You're practicing satipatthana, some kind of mindfulness practice. Whatever is arising, you can reflect on this. What is the gratification, the danger, and the escape? So this is the Buddha's answer as to why what's the difference? Well, the difference is the developing the mind state of vipassana, seeing things as they are. This is the Buddha's gift to the world. So gratification, danger, and escape. What's the gratification and danger and escape when it comes to forms? What's the gratification, danger, and escape when it comes to feelings? Question like this, the wanderers of other religions would be stumped, and in addition, would get frustrated. Why is that? Because they're out of their element. I don't see anyone in this world with its gods, Maras, and Brahmas, this population with its ascetics and Brahmins, its gods and humans, who could provide a satisfying answer to these questions except for the realized one, or his disciples, or someone who has heard it from him. And what is the gratification of sensual pleasures? There are these 5 kinds of sensual stimulation. What 5? Sights known by the eye that are likable, desirable, agreeable, pleasant, sensual, and arousing. Sounds known by the ear. Smells known by the nose. Tastes known by the tongue. Touches known by the body that are likable, desirable, agreeable, pleasant, sensual, and arousing. These are the 5 kinds of sensual stimulations. The pleasure and happiness that arises from these 5 kinds of sensual stimulations is the gratification of sensual pleasures. And so we have pleasant experiences, engaging in pleasant pleasant contact, pleasant feeling through the senses. This is gratification. We like these pleasant experiences. We want to keep engaging in them because we don't know the danger. And what is the drawback of sensual pleasure, or the danger of sensual pleasures? It's when a gentleman earns a living by means such as arithmetic, accounting, calculating, farming, trade, raising cattle, archery, government service, or one of the professions. But they must face cold and heat, being hurt by the touch of flies, mosquitoes, wind, sun, and reptiles, and risking death from hunger and thirst. This is the drawback of sensual pleasures apparent in this very life, a massive suffering caused by sensual pleasures. That gentleman might try hard, strive, and make an effort, but fail to earn any money. If this happens, they sorrow and wail and lament, beating their breast and falling into confusion, saying, "Oh, my hard work is wasted. My efforts are fruitless." This too is a drawback of sensual pleasures, apparent in this very life, a massive suffering caused by sensual pleasures. That gentleman might try hard, strive, and make an effort and succeed in earning money, but they experience the pain and sadness when they try to protect it, thinking, "How can I prevent my wealth from being taken by rulers or bandits, consumed by fire, swept away by flood, or taken by unloved heirs?" And even though they protect it and ward it, rulers or bandits take it, or fire consumes it, or flood sweeps it away, or unloved heirs take it. They sorrow and wail and lament, beating their breast and falling into confusion. What once was mine is gone. This too is a drawback of sensual pleasures, apparent in this very life, the massive suffering caused by sensual pleasures. Right, so we have an example of not getting what you want, working hard and not getting what you want, and then working hard and getting, but then you're worried about losing it. Guarding and protecting, worried about taxes, government taxes and bandits and all kinds of things that will take it away. What once was mine is gone. This too is a drawback of sensual pleasures apparent in this very life, a massive suffering caused by sensual pleasures. Furthermore, for the sake of sensual pleasures, kings fight with kings, aristocrats fight with aristocrats, Brahmins fight with Brahmins, and householders fight with householders. A mother fights with her child, a child with mother, father with child, and child with father. Brother fights with brother, brother with sister, sister with brother, and friends fight with friends. Once they've started quarreling, arguing, and disputing, they attack each other with fists, stones, rods, and swords. This is a framework we've seen in many places in the suttas, where the Buddha actually is talking about craving. It starts with desire, then it moves to acquisition, going out and grasping, and then you have to defend it with swords and such, and this kind of acquisition and defense, and all of this is a cause for suffering. That's what's being said here, right? It causes people to fight each other, Like one person wins the lottery or something, and then all of a sudden there's all kinds of fighting and arguing, and bickering. People, even enough for relatives to fight each other. Once they started quarreling, arguing, and disputing, they attack each other with fist stones, rods, and swords, resulting in death or deadly pain. This too is a drawback of sensual pleasures, apparent in this very life, a massive suffering caused by sensual pleasures. So think about like some of the examples here, right? You covet another person's wealth, you covet another person's spouse, right? All the examples throughout history of people who have, out of covetousness and greed and envy and all of these things, done really unskillful things out of having that pleasure. And this is what the Buddha is explaining to us here, giving us these examples. Furthermore, for the sake of sensual pleasures, they don their sword and shield, fasten their bows and arrows, and plunge into battle massed on both sides, with arrows and spears flying and swords flashing. There they are struck with arrows and spears, and their heads are chopped off, resulting in death and deadly pain. This too is a drawback of sensual pleasures apparent in this very life, a massive suffering caused by sensual pleasures. I'm reminded of the Ratapala Sutta that we did last week, right? Where what is said in there about the king, right? The king conquers the near shore and sees the far shore with craving yet unabated. Furthermore, for the sake of sensual pleasures, they don their sword and shield, fasten their bows and arrows, and charge wetly plastered bastions, with arrows and spears flying and swords flashing. So they're sieging castles, sieging fortresses. They are struck with arrows and spears, splashed with dung, crushed by a superior force, and their heads are chopped off. This is also reminiscent of most people are familiar with the Asu Sutta, the tears, where it says, greater than all the tears in all the great oceans is the tears you've shed by loss of loved ones throughout your long journey in samsara. But most people don't talk about the sutta a couple suttas later, where it says, greater than all the water and all the great oceans is the blood that you've shed by decapitating and being decapitated. Okay? That's kind of not as poetic as the tears, isn't it? But it's in there, right? Throughout all of the many journeys in samsara, all of the decapitations you have done and experienced. So much blood is to be larger than all the great oceans. This too is a drawback of sensual pleasures, apparent in this very life, a massive suffering caused by sensual pleasures. Furthermore, for the sake of sensual pleasures, they break into houses, plunder wealth, steal from isolated buildings, commit highway robbery, and commit adultery. I was just talking about, right? Lusting and coveting other people's wealth and other people's spouses, etc. The rulers would arrest them and subject them to various punishments: whipping, caning. Hello, Tu. Hello, Gita. Hello, Wasabi. And hello, Amaranta. Whipping, caning, and clubbing, cutting off of hands and feet, or both, or hands or feet, or both, cutting off of ears or nose, or both, the porridge pot, the shell shave, the Rahu's mouth, the garland of fire, the burning hand, the bulrush twist, the bark dress, the antelope, the meat hook, the coins, the caustic pickle, the twisting bars, the straw mat, being splashed with hot oil, being fed to the dogs, being impaled alive, and being beheaded. It's quite some interesting names to these tortures. Some of the later commentaries give some explanations as to what they are. If you read Bhikkhu Bodhi's books, if you have his books, he goes over in one of his commentary notes. He goes over what the commentary says. Some of these things. Gregory says caustic pickle is a great band name. Yeah. Well, Bhikkhu Bodhi's translation is acid pickle. Which is, I think I kind of like the acid pickle thing, but that was also a joke in my online community in terms of moderators and punishments to people who cause trouble in the community, stuff like that. But these are various punishments that could happen to you if you're breaking the law. They fought the law and the law won. These result in death and deadly pain. This too is a drawback of sensual pleasures, apparent in this very life. A massive suffering caused by sensual pleasures. Furthermore, for the sake of sensual pleasures, they conduct themselves badly by way of body, speech, and mind. When their body breaks up after death, they're reborn in a place of loss, a bad place, the underworld, hell. This is a drawback of sensual pleasures to do with lives to come, a massive suffering caused by sensual pleasures. So that's a heck of a lot of drawbacks and dangers of sensual pleasures. We've gone over the gratification of sensual pleasures, and we've gone over the drawbacks. And when you really reflect this with wisdom, you're like, yeah, this is kind of pleasurable. It feels good. But man, look at all the drawbacks, and look at all the stupidity that I would cause chasing after these sensual pleasures. How about I start to escape these sensual? And so, what is the escape from sensual pleasures? Removing and giving up desire and greed for sensual pleasures. This is the escape for sensual pleasures. So this is always the escape. And no matter what sutta you read, where the Buddha is talking about gratification, danger, and escape. And honestly, this is talked about in a fair number of suttas, and unfortunately not enough in Dhamma talks. Even I remember I had never heard a Dhamma talk where a monk talked about this. I had first read it in the suttas myself. And I said, wow, this is amazing. This is a really important practice. How come not so many people talk about this practice? Right? The Buddha is saying, this is an exact practice for you to put into practice right now. Whatever you're experiencing, what is the gratification? What is the danger? What is the escape? It's a framework for investigating your experience. And always, 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 the escape is the letting go of the craving for that experience. So you are investigating, you're seeing, oh, this is the gratification. This is why I keep stupidly doing this thing over and over again. These are all the downsides and the drawbacks. And as you do that over and over and over, you naturally just start to see, why am I doing this to myself? I'm causing myself all kinds of suffering. I know. Why don't I let go? So, removing and giving up desire and greed for sensual pleasures. This is the escape from sensual pleasures. There are ascetics and Brahmins who don't truly understand sensual pleasures, gratification, drawback, and escape in this way for what they are. It's impossible for them to completely understand sensual pleasures themselves, right? So what the Buddha is saying, These wanderers of other sects, they say that, they also are taught to understand sensual pleasures, but they don't really understand. So it's impossible for them to escape it. Right? This is the Buddha is explaining why his teaching is distinct from these other wanderers' teaching, even though they claim that they are also taught to understand sensual pleasures. There are ascetics and Brahmins who truly don't understand sensual pleasures, gratification, danger, and escape in this way for what they are. It's impossible for them to completely understand sensual pleasures themselves, or to instruct another so that practicing accordingly, they will completely understand sensual pleasures. There are ascetics and Brahmins who do truly understand sensual pleasures, gratification, danger, and escape in this way for what they are. It's impossible for them to completely understand sensual pleasures themselves, or to instruct another so that practicing accordingly, they will completely understand sensual pleasures. All right, so that's sensual pleasures. And now we're going to go through the others. And what is the gratification of forms? So the gratification of this body of forms, my body, other people's bodies, my form, other form, external form, etc. Suppose there was a girl of the Brahmins, aristocrats, or householders in her 15th or 16th year, neither too tall nor too short, neither too thin nor too fat, neither too dark nor too fair. Is she not at the height of her beauty and prettiness? Yes, sir. The pleasure and happiness that arises from this beauty and prettiness is the gratification of forms. And that's like also there's a sutta where a Brahmin or somebody is like infatuated with the Buddha. Oh, looking at the Buddha. Oh, it is so wonderful, so handsome, so bright, so such and such and such. And the Buddha instructs him that all he is seeing is suffering. All he is seeing is bone and sinew, etc. Right? So that's understanding the the reality of things. And so what is the drawback? Suppose that sometime later you were to see the same sister, 80, 90, or 100 years old, bent double, crooked, leaning on a staff, trembling as they walk, ailing, past their prime, with teeth broken, hair gray, and scanty or bald, skin wrinkled, and limbs blotchy. What do you think, mendicants? Has not that former beauty vanished, and the drawback become clear? Yes, sir. This is the drawback of forms. And the Therigatha, the voices of the elder bhikkhunis. You have Ambapali, who is a very famous courtesan, one of the most beautiful women, and she is reflecting on her youth and how everything was so wonderful and beautiful and pert and firm and such, and now she's old and everything's falling apart. It's very kind of very beautiful reflection. So that was old now. Furthermore, suppose you were to see the same sister, sick, suffering, gravely ill, collapsed in her own urine and feces, being picked up by some and put down by others. What do you think, mendicants? Has not that former beauty vanished and the drawback become clear? Yes, sir. This too is the drawback of forms. Hello, Faze and Yankee. Furthermore, suppose that you were to see the same sister as a corpse, discarded in a charnel ground, and it had been dead for 1, 2, or 3 days, bloated, livid, and festering. What do you think, mendicants? Has not that former beauty vanished, and the drawback become clear? Yes, sir. This too is a drawback of forms. Furthermore, suppose that you were to see the same sister as a corpse, discarded in the charnel ground, and it was being devoured by crows, hawks, vultures, herons, dogs, tigers, leopards, jackals, and many kinds of creatures. Furthermore, suppose that they were to see the same sister as the corpse discarded in the charnel ground. So this is somewhat similar, pretty similar to in Mahasatipatthana Sutta, the foundations of mindfulness, under the section of the body, where you're reflecting on the decay of the corpse. And it has been reduced to a skeleton with flesh and blood, held together by sinews, a skeleton rid of flesh and blood, rid of flesh smeared with blood, and held together by sinews, a skeleton rid of flesh and blood, held together by sinews. Bones of sinews scattered in every direction. Here a ham bone, there a foot bone, here a shin bone, here a thigh bone, here a hip bone, there a rib bone, here a backbone, there an arm bone, here a neck bone, there a jaw bone, here a bone, there a bone, everywhere a bone, here a tooth, there a skull. Furthermore, suppose that you were to see the same sister as a corpse discarded in the charnel ground, and it had been reduced to white bones, the color of shells, decrepit bones, heaped in a pile, bones rotted and crumbled to powder. What do you think, mendicants? Has not that former beauty vanished and the drawback become clear? Yes, sir. This too is a drawback of forms. And what is the escape of forms? Removing and giving up desire and greed for forms. This is the escape from forms. There are ascetics and Brahmins who truly don't understand forms gratification, drawback, and escape in this way, for what they are. It's impossible for them to completely understand forms themselves or to instruct another so that practicing accordingly, they will completely understand forms. There are ascetics and Brahmins who do truly understand forms gratification, drawback, and escape in this way for what they are. It's possible for them to completely understand form themselves or to instruct others so that practicing accordingly, they will completely understand forms. And what is the gratification of feelings? It's when a mendicant, quite secluded from sensual pleasures, secluded from unskillful qualities, enter and remains in the first jhana, which has the rapture and bliss born of seclusion, while placing the mind and keeping it connected. At that time, a mendicant doesn't intend to hurt themselves, hurt others, or hurt both. They feel only feelings that are not hurtful. Freedom from being hurt is the ultimate gratification of feelings, I say. Furthermore, a mendicant enters and remains in the second jhana, third jhana, fourth jhana. At that time, a mendicant doesn't intend to hurt themselves, hurt others, or hurt both. They feel only feelings that are not hurtful. Freedom from being hurt in this ultimate gratification of feelings, I say. It's quite interesting, isn't it? You probably weren't expecting that the Buddha would be going to jhanas when we're talking about gratification of feelings. But that is technically the highest pleasurable feeling. The Buddha is quite clear on this. It's also high pleasurable feeling that is not to be feared because it is not of the 5 chords of sensual pleasures, right? So this is very clear, like this is the best pleasure, and it is skillful pleasure. It's not of the form. It's not of the what you call it, the chords of sensual pleasure. And what is the drawback of feeling? That the feelings are impermanent, suffering, and perishable. That is their drawback. Have you ever had a nice meditation? It's like, oh, this is so great. I've never been here before. This is so wonderful and peaceful. And then it's over and it goes away. And you're like, oh, I hope that this happens again the next time I meditate. And the next time you meditate, it's absolutely miserable and horrible and you don't have any peace whatsoever. That's the drawback. You became attached to that nice, peaceful meditation. It is impermanent, suffering, and perishable. That is the drawback. And what is the escape from feelings? Removing and giving up desire and greed for feelings. That is the escape from feelings. There are ascetics and Brahmins who don't truly understand feeling, gratification, drawback, and escape in this way for what they are. It's impossible for them to completely understand feelings themselves or to instruct another so that practicing accordingly, they will completely understand feelings. There are ascetics and Brahmins who do truly understand feelings, gratification, drawback, and escape. In this way, for what they are, it is possible for them to completely understand feelings themselves, or to instruct others so that practicing accordingly, they will completely understand feelings. This is what the Buddha said. Satisfied, the mendicants approved of what the Buddha said. And so that's the end of the longer discourse. I may or may not be mistaken, but there's at least one or two places where the shorter discourse is actually longer than the longer discourse. I don't know if this is the case, but it's a fairly short sutta, but so packed with very important things to understand. Right? This gratification, danger, and escape. If you have not, if you're practicing satipatthana and you're trying to develop mindfulness, and you have not added the gratification, danger, to escape to your toolbox, then you should. Because this is a way for us to understand why we keep doing the things that we're doing. We have to understand why something is gratifying, why we want to keep doing something. There is a reason. There is something that is being gratified. Even if it doesn't seem like outwardly pleasurable, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be like so like grossly, obviously pleasurable. There could be some very subtle gratification that we're getting from doing something. We might even think that we can't even see the gratification. We can see lots of the downsides of doing something, but we keep doing it anyway. Why? Because we don't know the gratification. We don't know why we keep doing it. It's very good we understand the downsides, because the downsides can often be very gross, right? We're talking, what are the downsides of the Buddha's mentioning? Being killed and do all these kind of like really strong things. But the gratification can be very subtle, hard to see. This is why you have to keep investigating, keep trying to understand your actions over and over and over and over again, over long periods of time. And as you do that over long periods of time, you start to get little subtle clues, little tidbits. And you can't really you can't piece them together yet. It's like you're trying to put together 1,000-piece puzzle, but you only have little pieces, a piece here and a piece there and a piece there and a piece there. But as you do this practice over and over again, over long periods of time, gradually the picture starts to become more clear. You start to see why you get gratification in doing what you're doing, even if it is also causing you lots of suffering. And the more you see that gratification and understand that gratification, the more you develop disenchantment, nibbida, the more you develop viraga, dispassion. You see, all these bad things arise because I do this. Now I see the cause. I see the gratification. Now that gratification has been weakened, and then eventually it will be destroyed, and you will not do that again. You will have found the escape. The escape is letting go of the craving of that thing. There's no more craving. You're not getting any gratification out of it. All you see is the downside. And as they say, the juice is not worth the squeeze. The gratification in doing this is not worth the suffering of received from doing it. And with that wisdom, you don't do it anymore. So if you practice for many, many years, For like myself, 20 years, there's been activities and habits that I've done that I've watched so long, so much that I saw the cause of the gratifications and I'm able to let go and I don't do them anymore. And there are some that are so subtle, so refined, so hard to see that even after 20 years, I feel like I've barely even made a dent. And that's okay. I just keep trying to get more pieces of that puzzle. Keep investigating, keep seeing, what's the gratification? Why do I keep doing this? What is causing me to keep doing this? It's not through willpower that we let go. It's not through wishes. How many times in the suttas the Buddha says, and this is not to be had by wishing. It's through insight and wisdom that we let go. That's the only way. And so if we start to investigate and see things, see the gratification, the danger, and the escape in all of our experiences, then your wisdom will grow very, very well, very deeply. So with that, I want to leave it open now for Q&A. So if you have any questions about this topic, you can put it in the chat. If you have any questions about stuff that is off topic, it might be best for you to save that for Monk Chat, which is going to be in 2 days, Friday night. That's the best time to bring all kinds of variety of different questions. So we'll give it a few minutes to see if there's any questions in the chat. And if not, also we'll see if there's any questions for the people here at the monastery. And if there's no questions, well, we'll call it an early night. And this is my last night and my last live stream here. Who knows, maybe forever. If I'm alive again and next time I come visit, then maybe I'll be on again. But this will be the last because tomorrow I'm flying out.
Folks have to contemplate the drawback of your form, Bhante.
Yeah.
Tell us again where you're going.
California.
California.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk all about there's an ordination you're going to?
2. I'm doing 2 ordinations in 2 days. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
One of the things that struck me, I wonder if you'd be up for talking about this a little bit. So this, as I recall, this sutta is addressed to monks, and there's talk at the beginning about dangers and sensual pleasures related to your livelihood. And so for monks, our livelihood is very simple. We even rely on alms food for our food and in similar ways for other requisites that we use. But for lay people who have to earn a livelihood, I wonder if you have any thoughts about how to hold that discussion about the dangers in trying to have a livelihood and in seeking sensual pleasures, but also perhaps on the other side, just plain like you have to have a livelihood to get by. You just put yourself and your family and so on. I wonder if you have any thoughts for those who are listening, who are many people about how to hold that.
So Ajahn question or request for me to speak is related to the kind of layperson's need to have a livelihood and a career and such, and connected to what we were talking about. And in a way, I think that actually goes pretty deep. Like the fact that you're kind of born means you have to do these things. And the fact that you have to do these things means that it's very easy to fall into the trap of wanting more, needing more, right? And so I think the best thing to reflect on here is balance. as somebody who has a family and children, you might be driven by, I need to work more so I can have more money so that my family can have better things, which is not necessarily a bad or unskillful thought. Right? It's out of desire of love and care that you want your family to have a good life. However, then just kind of like reflecting on the gratification and the danger. Well, what is the danger of working so much to give your children a better life that you're not there to watch them grow up? Right? Like you have to kind of find a balance, don't you? If you really want to be there. So I think that's kind of like the key for lay people is a balance. I think you can go to kind of an extreme, like I've seen lay people who are actually quite rich, and they live in a house, like a little cheapo house that's falling apart, and their car is like kind of falling apart to the point where it's dangerous. And I'm like, you can have like a normal regular car, right? Like you don't have to, like you don't need like a Lamborghini. But like you can be concerned about like things like safety and like your car not falling apart in the middle when you're driving, things like that. At least that's kind of what I think. I don't think I've ever actually like had that conversation yet with somebody, but I think this is a good lesson actually. This is probably going too far, right? It's the same thing with like monastics, right? We have a bowl and robes and things like that. And we're supposed to be content with whatever bowl and whatever robe we're given. And sometimes we're given fancy things. Sometimes we're not given fancy things. It doesn't matter. The contentment is whatever we have, we're using it. And the second that you have a patch, maybe the lay people see it and they say, here's a robe. And they throw a robe at you and things like that. And, this is good. But it's, well, how much do you need? You don't need much. You have a balance. You try to find a balance between there. So I think balance is the important reflection. Yes, you have to do things to get by. So it's how do you do it in a skillful way that is balancing these needs and desires. So we have hello Rick, hello D, thank you. Mr. asked a question about metta. Mr., I would suggest putting that question to Friday, because that kind of brings us on a whole other tangent, especially if it's kind of very basic general talk about metta. So Norma says, Bhante, what is your gratification that gives you the biggest challenge to let go? Probably my habitual coping mechanisms related to food. Like, even though I see that there's a part of me that's completely and utterly self-destructive, I still haven't like... especially when I get like either in depression or in really negative aversive mind states, I fall back to food as a coping mechanism, right? Like it's a friend and it's a quick, pleasant experience, all these things. And while I have come pretty far with this stuff, it's still there, especially when I'm not in a clear mind, right? Especially, and if I feel like maybe I don't have enough nutrition or whatever, my mind's like, well, just go take some, have some food later or whatever, which leads to a lot of unskillfulness, especially as a monastic. As a layperson, it's not that big of an issue. But the idea is, though, that I have all of these food neuroses from a young age that are still quite hard to fully understand the gratification that I've been able to let them go. Right? And for other people, that might be alcohol or drugs or video games or watching lots of TV or whatever. We have these kind of activities that give some kind of gratification, but in the end are not really helpful. Like for me, it's like, okay, I pick out on some good food, and then it's like for weeks afterwards, it's neuroses about, oh my God, I'm gaining weight. And it's just all the suffering of these things. Or even if it's not even necessarily, like when I'm with my family or some places where like the food is very rich or, things like that. And maybe even I'm not abusing the food, but I know I'm going to gain weight. And the neuroses go, oh, I don't want to gain weight. Like I want to look like a really skinny monk. Right. So I have all these kind of things going on in my head. And so this is very deep stuff. Like the joke that I make is that I will probably not fully overcome all my food neuroses until I am very close to awakening. Because when I look at my mind, there's definitely nothing more deep and neurotic than my stuff related to food. For sure. Even way more so than things like sex and stuff like that. Like my food stuff is really deep. So. Amaranta says, thank you, Bhante, for your, okay. I know we have to investigate why do we need that gratification? How do you do? Would you share some examples? Yeah, I thought I gave some examples. So when you do an action, what you're trying to find is the reason why you're doing the action. Right? There's a gratification. There's some kind of a pleasant experience, and it doesn't have to be like food or sex or whatever. I mean, there's something that the mind is getting out of you doing that, and so you have to find that. Right? Whether if it's doing some kind of habitual coping mechanism, or it's even just like a tick, like maybe you do something, some kind of like self, kind of thing that is to like make you feel better, right? There's hundreds, if not thousands of activities and experiences that you have that you can investigate the gratification and the danger and the escape. What helped you with blocking your urges, whether worldly or sexual? By not blocking them, by understanding them. That's the only way you overcome these things. That's the only way you overcome any craving. If you try to force it or run away from it or hide from it, it will eventually overcome you. You have to understand it by developing wisdom and insight. And then you let go of at least the grosser levels of these things. And the deeper your insight and your wisdom, you let go of ever more subtle, refined levels of these things. The Buddha never tells us to repress, suppress, avoid. We have to know, we have to understand, we have to see. That's how we overcome. Otherwise, we're always lagging behind. We're always like a strong man, like in the suttas or the Buddha says, like some similes where two strong men could come and take you and drag you around and do whatever they want with you. Right? That's what your cravings and desires and your drives, your human species drives and things like that. That's what they do to you. And you can't be like, no, I will refuse to do blah, blah, blah. That will only last a short time. Wisdom and insight is what allows you to let go and those things have much less power over you. That's how it's done. Rose says food addiction is most likely often connected with anxiety. There was a cause for it which needs to be rigged out. Yeah, anxiety, but also fun. Like some of my most pleasant experiences, especially of my first 20 years, was just sitting there watching a TV show and just eating. Right? There's no real anxiety to that. It's just kind of like multiple levels of pleasure happening at the same time. Right. So, yeah, anxiety can be a part of it for sure, but it doesn't necessarily, it's not the whole thing. Definitely not. Like you say, most likely often connected. All right. Anything here? Oh,
So you mentioned the craving, removing craving, Bhante. Is that also a reference to like the Noble Eightfold Path? Is that something like a reference to that? Like, because in the third Noble Truth, the Buddha, I guess, says there's an end to craving, and then the fourth one he puts out the fourth, the Eightfold Path.
Mm-hmm.
So I was just wondering, is there
I don't know if it's necessarily a direct reference, but I mean, it all fits together. So yes, the Noble Eightfold Path is the path you need to take to abandon your suffering, right? The Buddha says, just as all the footprints of mammals on land fit within the elephant, so do all the teachings fit within the Four Noble Truths. So yes, this is all the Four Noble Truths as well. This is so if you're thinking about, okay, what am I engaging when I'm doing gratification, danger, and escape? Right effort, right mindfulness, right samadhi. You're engaging all of these things, right? You're also engaging right action, right speech, because you're investigating those. That's all part of it as well. So it's like all of these, right view, right intention, all of these things. This is all what when you're trying to investigate your experience through this, that's what these are all being engaged. Yeah. Oh. All right, just some comments. All right, friends. Well, I think that is good for the night. Well, Sukiyotu, may you be happy and at ease. Practice well and be well. May you have a spiritually successful and peaceful practice until we meet again. Have a good night.
For sure.